A silent lab sits in the dark, screens still glowing, coffee still warm, and a brilliant mind missing without a trace. Something happened here, something fast, something planned, something dangerous. And before anyone knew it, Detective Hudson and Rex were already racing toward a mystery that could shake the whole city. The night started like any other in the quiet tech district. But nothing felt normal when the police arrived at the private research lab. The building looked untouched from the outside, yet the silence inside felt heavy, almost unnatural. Detective Charlie Hudson stepped through the doorway, his eyes scanning the room with sharp focus. Papers were scattered on the floor, a chair was knocked over, and a set of glowing monitors showed lines of code still running. It looked less like a break-in and more like someone left in a hurry, someone who had no time to pack, call, or even breathe. Rex moved ahead, nose low, reading the room in the way only he could. His ears twitched, picking up details humans would miss, and he paused beside a dropped keycard with a faint scent that didn't belong to anyone working in the building. Hudson knew right away this wasn't a simple fight or robbery. Something much bigger was unfolding. The missing man was a famous cybersecurity engineer known for building a new kind of encryption tool, a tool so powerful that many believed it could lock or unlock almost any digital system on the planet. This device wasn't just valuable, it was dangerous in the wrong hands. Hudson remembered the man's recent interviews where he warned that his work could spark competition, jealousy, and even crime. No one took those words seriously until now. As Hudson looked around, he found no blood, no sign of a struggle, but enough chaos to suggest the engineer never walked out willingly. Rex stopped at the back of the room, nose pressed against a small metal box lying on the floor. The box was open, empty, and clearly meant to hold something important. If the engineer had been taken, the thieves might have gotten the device too. Hudson crouched beside Rex and studied the box more closely. It had scratches along the side, as if someone grabbed it quickly or forced it open. The faint smell of cold metal and engine oil hinted that whoever touched it had been near machinery just before coming here. Hudson knew that meant one thing: the suspect might have used a vehicle, and not just any vehicle, something industrial or used in heavy work. Across the room, the power cables hanging from the wall showed signs of being yanked out in a hurry, like the engineer tried to disconnect something before he vanished. The air carried the scent of adrenaline, fear, and something else, something Rex recognized immediately. He followed the trail to the far corner, stopping at a vent cover that had been loosened. Hudson understood right away that someone tried to hide here or reach for help. Every detail added pressure to the mystery. There were no security guards, no working cameras, and no unlocked computers. Whoever came here was careful and knew exactly what they were looking for. Reports from the engineer's co-workers mentioned that he had been tense for days, checking over his shoulder and avoiding conversations. He even canceled meetings and ignored calls. Hudson wondered if the engineer knew this was coming. Rex picked up a different trail from the doorway, a second smell, light but clear, hinting at a stranger who wasn't part of the lab staff. This meant the crime involved more than one person. Hudson could already feel the case twisting into something deeper, something layered with secrets and risks. The room felt colder the longer they stayed. Hudson could almost sense the fear the engineer must have felt before disappearing. He could picture the moment: a sudden noise, a forced entry, a rush to protect his invention, and then silence. Rex nudged at the fallen keycard again, as if urging Hudson to notice it. The card belonged to the main security system, and without it, the engineer couldn't have escaped the building alone. Hudson realized the keycard wasn't dropped, it was taken from its owner. Whoever came for the engineer had access, planning, and a plan that seemed far from finished. Hudson stood up, his mind already forming theories. If they didn't find the engineer soon, the city could lose more than just a brilliant mind. And in that quiet, cold room, Hudson knew one thing for sure: this case had only just begun. The sharp morning light hit the windows of the police station as Hudson dropped the evidence bag on the table. Everything from the lab felt like it carried a hidden message, but nothing spoke clearly yet. While Jesse worked to pull security data from nearby buildings, Hudson watched Rex pacing around the room, nose searching, mind working. Rex wasn't restless, he was reading something the humans couldn't see. Hudson trusted that instinct more than any machine. Every time Rex paused, it was like a silent hint that the case was stretching its claws into darker places. The keycard, the empty metal box, the broken pattern of the room, they weren't random. They pointed to a plan, a forced path, and a criminal intelligent enough to stay invisible. That scared Hudson more than any weapon. Jesse finally called Hudson over with a tight look on his face. He found fragments from a traffic camera 2 streets away from the lab. The footage wasn't whole, almost like someone knew which angles to avoid, but a few frames showed a dark van stopping near the building around the time of the disappearance. The plates were covered, the windows tinted, and the driver wore a cap pulled low. But there was one small detail they didn't expect, a faint reflection on the windshield showing the outline of the engineer inside the van. He was alive, but the way he sat, shoulders dropped, head forward, showed fear, maybe even resignation. Hudson leaned closer, replaying the clip in slow motion. There was something off about the way the van moved. Too smooth, too careful. Like the driver had done this before. Meanwhile, Dr. Sarah examined a white device found in the lab. Her early results gave Hudson a new piece of the puzzle. The white data wasn't erased by simple software. It was destroyed using a method only a handful of experts could pull off, people from inside the cybersecurity world. That meant the suspect wasn't just someone who wanted the device. It could be someone who understood the engineer's work deeply, maybe even someone who felt threatened by it. The thought made Hudson step back. When crimes came from personal fear instead of simple greed, they always got messy. Sarah also found traces of special-grade solder and chemical compounds often used in private engineering workshops, not commercial labs. Whoever wiped the device might have taken it somewhere hidden, somewhere isolated. Rex interrupted the moment with a low growl, staring at the items spread across the table. His nose locked onto the engineer's missing badge, still carrying the faint trace of a scent foreign to the lab. Hudson followed Rex's lead, letting him sniff the keycard again. This time, Rex pulled toward the doorway as if demanding they follow. Hudson immediately understood. The scent trail was fresh enough to track. They headed outside, and Rex led them through the police lot, past the street, and toward an alley behind a row of old buildings. The alley smelled of oil and burned rubber, just like the scratches on the empty box. The pieces were falling closer together. Hidden behind a dumpster, Hudson found tiny tire marks, almost invisible, but Rex pressed his nose to them with certainty. The pattern wasn't from a normal car. These marks belonged to specialized tires often used on heavy cargo vans or mobile workshops. That meant the van from the camera wasn't random, it was chosen for this job. Hudson checked nearby walls and noticed faint scuff marks from a metal door sliding shut recently. He forced it open and found a small storage room. The air inside was stale, but one thing stood out immediately: a piece of fabric caught on a nail, carrying the same scent Rex had followed. It didn't belong to the engineer. It belonged to the person who took him. Hudson felt a cold wave of realization. Whoever planned this was smart enough to wipe devices, hide from cameras, choose the right vehicle, and plant misleading clues. This wasn't an amateur. It was someone who studied the engineer, studied the lab, studied the police response times. Someone who wasn't just trying to steal technology but trying to send a message. Hudson looked down at Rex, who stared back with sharp, focused eyes. They both knew this wasn't the end of the trail. It was only the doorway into something much larger, something that had been building long before the engineer vanished. And now each step forward pulled them deeper into a world where every clue was a trap waiting to be sprung. Hudson could feel the pressure rising as the investigation reached a new layer. Every clue they found seemed to pull them further away from the simple idea of a kidnapping and closer to something that had been brewing quietly for months. Back at the station, the walls were covered with photos, maps, timestamps, and printed fragments of wiped code. It looked like chaos, but inside that chaos there was a pattern waiting to be seen. Hudson stared at the board for a long moment, letting the connection settle in his mind. The engineer wasn't just taken, he was targeted. Someone knew his habits, his fears, and even his emergency protocols. And whoever that person was, they stayed one step ahead, hiding just enough to keep the police guessing. Rex lay near the desk, alert but calm, his eyes following Hudson's movements like he understood the weight of the silence. Suddenly, Jesse rushed in with new information, something he found inside the failure logs of the building's surveillance system. It wasn't just shut down, it had been overridden by a custom code written hours before the kidnapping. The dangerous part, the code didn't match anything publicly known. It wasn't stolen or copied, it was original. That meant the suspect wasn't only technically skilled, they were creative, bold, and extremely confident in their abilities. Jesse pointed to one detail that made Hudson's stomach tighten. The code had the same structure as something the engineer once mentioned in a conference, something experimental, something he never released. If the suspect could write code mimicking the engineer's style, it meant they knew him well. Maybe too well that Sarah stepped in carrying new results from the metal box. It wasn't just scratched, it had tiny flecks of residue inside, like microdust from rare components used in encrypted hardware. These components were expensive, hard to find, and usually only supplied to government agencies or high-level research groups. The realization hit Hudson like a blow. Whoever forced the box open wasn't trying to destroy the device. They were checking if it was the right model. The criminals weren't just after any encryption tool, they wanted the engineer's prototype was the only one of its kind, and the only one capable of cracking certain international systems. This was no ordinary crime. It was a hunt for power disguised as a kidnapping. Hudson's thoughts were interrupted when Rex lifted his head suddenly, nose twitching. A delivery envelope had just arrived at the precinct, unsigned and unmarked. Something about it made Rex uneasy, and Hudson trusted that tension. He carefully opened it, pulling out a single photograph. The image showed the engineer sitting on a chair in a dim room, hands tied but face unhurt. His eyes, however, told a different story. They held fear but also a warning. A message had been written on the bottom of the photo with a marker. "Don't look for me. You won't like what you find." The handwriting didn't match the engineer's. It was sharp, almost carved into the surface like a threat meant to cut deeper than ink. Hudson stared at the words, feeling the pulse of the message. The criminals wanted the police to stop. They wanted time to finish what they started, but Hudson refused to be intimidated. He looked beyond the note, focusing on the background behind the engineer. There was a faint outline on the wall, a symbol of some kind. Jesse enhanced the image digitally, and when it became clear, Hudson felt a chill. It was a logo belonging to an old building on the outskirts of the city, a building that once served as a private research center before being abandoned. The site had a dark reputation tied to illegal projects and dangerous experiments. It was perfect for someone who wanted to hide something and perfect for someone who wanted to force a genius to do their bidding without anyone noticing. Hudson felt the case shifting again, opening up like a trap door beneath them. When criminals used abandoned buildings, it usually meant they planned to stay unseen for a long time or planned to make sure their victim would never be found. But this wasn't just about the engineer anymore. If the criminals got what they wanted from him, the encryption device could become a weapon capable of shutting down systems, stealing millions, or even destabilizing entire networks. Hudson knew the situation was collapsing into something far bigger than one missing man. And Rex, sensing Hudson's rising urgency, stood up ready to follow wherever the trail led next. The photograph changed everything. It wasn't only a message, it was a challenge. Now Hudson understood the truth behind the engineer's disappearance. The people who took him didn't fear the police, they feared wasting time. Which meant Hudson and Rex had only one option left: move fast, think faster, and find the engineer before the world found out what his invention could do in the wrong hands. The wind was sharp as Hudson drove toward the abandoned research building. the same symbol from the photo burning in his mind. The streets grew quieter the farther they went, until the city lights disappeared behind them like fading memories. The building stood alone at the edge of an empty industrial zone, tall and hollow, like a forgotten skeleton of a place that once buzzed with life. Its windows were broken, doors rusted, and the outside walls covered in years of dust and decay. But despite its dead appearance, Hudson felt the unmistakable presence of danger silent, heavy, waiting. Rex hopped out of the car before Hudson could even give a command, nose high, tail stiff, warning him that the scent trail was strong and fresh. The engineer had been here recently, or worse still was. Hudson kept his steps slow and careful, studying every inch of the ground. The dirt showed recent tire marks, small footprints, and one deeper scratch that suggested someone had dragged equipment inside. Rex followed the trail to the side of the building where a metal service door hung slightly open. The lock was new, too new for a place abandoned years ago. Someone had put it there recently, probably to keep uninvited eyes away. As Hudson pushed the door slowly, the hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years, but the floor inside told a different story. Fresh footprints, scattered wires, and a faint smell of chemicals hung in the air. Hudson recognized that smell. It was the same chemical Sarah found on the metal box in the lab. Whoever came here brought the encryption hardware with them. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Old machines lined the walls like sleeping giants, their surfaces coated with dust except for a few spots that had been wiped clean. Hudson knew criminals cleaned surfaces only when they wanted to hide fingerprints. That was their first mistake. Clean surfaces stood out more than dusty ones. In the center of the room, Rex stopped suddenly. His ears shot up, body low, muscles tight. He wasn't scared, he was ready. Hudson trusted that stance completely. Something was moving in the darkness ahead. He reached for the flashlight, pointing it at the far corner where he saw a metal door slightly ajar. A faint light flickered behind it, the same pale glow seen in the photo of the engineer. Hudson pushed the door slowly. Inside, the room looked like an unfinished workshop. Cables ran across the floor, connecting monitors, battery packs, and a heavy table where tools were scattered. On the wall, strange symbols and technical notes were scribbled hastily. In the corner sat the engineer, tied to a chair just like in the photo, but now he looked even weaker, his face pale and eyes tired. He lifted his head slowly, a look of relief and fear mixing together. Before Hudson could move closer, the engineer whispered with a shaky voice, telling him to stop. Hudson paused immediately. The engineer pointed to a small device strapped under the table, some kind of trigger connected to wires running up the wall. It didn't take long to understand the danger. The criminals hadn't just kidnapped him, they turned the room into a trap. While Hudson studied the device, a sudden noise echoed from behind them, a sharp metallic click. In a flash, Rex turned and growled, ready to strike. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure wearing a mask, holding a remote in one hand and a small tablet in the other. The voice behind the mask was calm, cold, and far too confident. They explained that the engineer had refused to complete the encryption project, so they used pressure, threats, and now traps to force him. They wanted the device finished so it could be sold to the highest bidder on the black market. To them, the engineer was nothing more than a tool. The masked figure raised the remote slightly, showing Hudson he was willing to activate the trap if anyone made a wrong move. Hudson felt the situation tightening like a rope around his neck, but he wasn't scared. He knew people like this, people who believed power was something you could steal. He stepped forward slowly, talking calmly, keeping the criminals focus on him, while Rex moved quietly around the side, unseen, patient, waiting for the right moment. The masked figure kept talking, bragging about his plan, his buyers, his success. Criminals always talk too much. It was their weakness, and Hudson used it well. With a small shift of his hand, he signaled Rex. The dog understood instantly. In one quick moment, Rex lunged, knocking the criminal off balance. The remote flew across the room, sliding under a cabinet. Hudson moved fast, grabbing the criminal's arm and forcing him to the ground before he could recover. The criminal fought back, but Hudson's grip tightened with every attempt until he was unable to move. The danger wasn't over, but the biggest threat had been stopped. The engineer, breathing hard, stared at Rex with gratitude shining in his tired eyes. Hudson secured the criminal while Rex guarded the trigger device with steady focus. The room felt less heavy now, less haunted, but Hudson knew this wasn't the final piece of the story. The criminals had a leader, someone who gave the orders, someone who wanted the encryption power badly enough to risk everything. And that person was still out there, waiting for their next move. Hudson knew one thing for certain: saving the engineer was only the beginning. The real fight was coming next, and Rex would be ready to face it right beside him.